Welcome to the Fantasy NASCAR podcast. I am Race for the Prize. A rant was asked for, so I will deliver. I was hesitant because I'm no longer full of piss and vinegar, much more mellowed out. But occasionally I do see something that I don't like. And hopefully, though, this rant is going to be useful and helpful in helping you build fantasy NASCAR lineups moving forward. I'm not just come on here to yell and scream and say, get off my lawn and shout at clouds. Hopefully a little bit of this information will help. So I watch plenty of these shows just to see what other people are talking about, see who's stealing from me this week, and then not mentioning my name. And there were plenty of them, once again, citing the stats that only I was talking about, and then just mysteriously forgetting to mention the source of their information. That's fine. They don't mention me in the positive, and I will not directly mention anyone else in the negative. That's resentful. So they will remain nameless. What I want to talk about is small sample size. You hear this a lot. Small sample size in Atlanta. Small sample size. This is lazy. Just step back and think. Where do you use small sample size? Use that with NFL. Use it with NBA, baseball, these other DFS sports. And then, like people have done in the past, which I've called out, they take this lexicon, these keywords, and they just superimpose them on NASCAR like this is a stick and ball sport as well. I mean, think about that. We're using the idea of small sample size, and look, I get it. There is an idea of less data. But what happens is, what is a small sample size in NASCAR? Have you ever asked yourself that? What determines a small sample size? So what you're probably going to do is what the lazy analysis does, which is one baseball game equals one race. How stupid is that? Have you ever stopped to think about that when we're talking about sample size? Oh, we've only got 4 races. So one race equals one baseball game? How did we come up with that calculation? We didn't. It was just lazy research that you've heard in shows that has just been superimposed. And so people went into Atlanta thinking, oh, it's a small sample size. You can't trust this stuff. You can't trust that, although I told you, Daniel Suarez, 2nd, 6th, and 4th, you can check the pods. You can check my article at DK Network. I wasn't worried about small sample size because that's not a small sample size. How many laps did he run? When you are calculating your small sample size, are you factoring in laps? Are you factoring in types of tracks? It's just lazy. It really is. It's just a dismissive way that people do fantasy analysis and don't really think. Sure, there are going to be small sample sizes in DFS NASCAR. There's going to be fewer laps, and you can determine where you decide that. But to just look at the number of races, you're not looking at laps. You're not looking at specific laps. I mean, we're talking about thousands of laps of data. Thousands of laps. If a batter faced thousands of pitches, would that be a small sample size? If a basketball player had thousands of possessions, and within those thousands of laps, there are multiple turns. There is on throttle, off throttle time. It's kind of a lot of data. And yet you get people like, oh, we've only had 4 races here. Yeah, you've only had 4 finishes here. That's fine. But there's a couple other laps that go on if you're actually watching the races. If you're not a pretend fantasy NASCAR content provider. So here comes the rant. You got me fired up. But ultimately, when we do some of this, I mean, I worry that when you have like really clickbaity, poor content, just trust the Sims. The Sims don't know this stuff. The Sim can't do this. The Sim is going to say small sample size. The Sims do not have every lap programmed into them. The Sims do not have the context programmed into them. They have 4 finishes. So yeah, you're right. Small sample size is going to hurt you if you're just going with the Sims. If you're just going with the projections and the other projections and then the other projections and then aggregating all that, which is simply just pulling average finish. Maybe they have average running position in there as well. Yeah, you're probably going to have a small sample size error. But if you're grinding it out, There isn't a small sample size. If you're grinding it out, you're not surprised that Daniel Suarez won that race yesterday. Trackhouse has speed at this track. And even if you do think, oh, it's still small sample size, you can calculate Ross Chastain's laps in there as well, and you have now doubled your sample size. So it's not as small. It's never as small as you think it is. There is plenty of data. I have the data. Racefortheprize.com. I guess this has turned into a commercial or an infomercial from the rant. But this idea of small sample size, I could be wrong. But at the very least, it's something that should be explored. It's something that we should all think, what constitutes a true small sample size? And I stand firmly in the belief that just looking at a race equals a game, a race equals one NFL contest. Why aren't we breaking it down further? Why aren't we looking closer? Why aren't we looking at specific laps? It's just absolutely insane. Because again, in baseball, yeah, they get 3 at-bats. And for the most part, we don't really care what they're doing for the other 3 hours. In NASCAR, you're competing every lap. It's like in a 200 lap race, that's 200 at bats. And yet we want to be lazy and just say, oh, this is just like the other sports. It's not. We've gone over this before, and the approach has to be different. But we carry over these terms from other sports and DFS because people just do shows like the other shows, and no one ever really tries to break out of the bubble. They phone in the NASCAR show. I mean, it's just the truth. Now, I think they phone in a lot of the other shows where we just talk about ownerships. There are some really good shows out there. Establish the Run is absolutely amazing when it comes to breaking down NBA. They're watching the games. They're paying attention to every single play. It is great, great analysis. I could not recommend them enough. I think it's like every day at 2 o'clock. They go through the injuries. They go through who's playing, what they're doing, all of the decisions the players are making. It is absolutely wonderful. I like watching EMAC on the weekends. I think EMAC is one of the best people to ever be in the DFS industry. There's plenty of really good guys. And there's plenty of people out there that make us all look bad. And, I think at times I probably make us look bad. And that's okay. But DFS NASCAR often is kind of the worst of all of it because it just borrows from the worst of the other sports and then superimposes it and follows the same rigmarole and doesn't try to rethink or reinvent the wheel. My treadmill has automatically shut off because I've gone too far too long. Let's fire back up. Why not? Because I got a little bit more rant left in me. Anyway, and I've talked about this before, superimposing terms. We got to be careful with that. So at the very least, if you come away with this, hopefully not like, oh, he's a resentful, angry man. If that's where, I accept that and I understand that. And I apologize for that. And I don't mean to offend anyone. I don't mean to hurt anyone's feelings. As I said before, I'm trying to mellow out. And I accept blame there and criticism if I was too mean. But if you can get past that, and I'm a big boy, I can take that. If you can get past that, please, at the very least, start exploring the concept of sample size in NASCAR and rethinking it and not just simply taking other sports ideas and then superimposing them on race car driving. If you did, then you didn't trust Daniel Suarez, and you should have trusted Daniel Suarez at Atlanta. Hey, blessed to have you guys around. Please like, subscribe, share the video. Love you guys. Trip to Light's fantastic.